From lost pup to fearless canine, a police dog's journey. What if a stray dog, once left to survive on the streets, became the only hope in a life-or-death mission? This is the incredible story of Ace, the canine no one believed in. The city. Streets were cold and unkind. Rain poured relentlessly, drenching the cracked pavement and forming shallow puddles that reflected the dim glow of the streetlights. Hidden beneath an abandoned car, a small German shepherd puppy curled up tightly, trying to shield himself from the bitter chill. His frail body trembled, his damp fur clinging to his thin frame. The occasional gust of wind sent a shiver down his spine, but he was too weak to move. His hunger gnawed at his tiny belly, a deep ache that had become all too familiar. The pup let out a soft whimper, his voice barely a whisper against the roaring storm. Beyond his hiding place, the world moved on without him. Distant sirens wailed, cars sped past, and muffled voices echoed through the alleyways. No one stopped. No one noticed the tiny creature fighting to survive in the shadows. The pup's heart ached, not just from hunger but from loss, though he barely remembered what he had lost. Had there once been a warm home, a mother's comforting presence? The memories were fading, slipping away like the raindrops on the pavement. He had learned the hard way that humans were not always kind. Some had chased him away, some had thrown things at him, others simply ignored his desperate, pleading eyes. His trust had shattered long before the storm came. His ears twitched at every distant sound, a car door slamming, a dog barking in the distance. His instincts screamed at him to stay hidden. The world was dangerous, and a tiny pup like him didn't stand a chance. The night grew colder. The rain didn't let up, and neither did the gnawing hunger. The pup's small body trembled harder, his breaths shallow and quick. He needed food, he needed warmth. But where? A low growl rumbled in the distance, sending a fresh wave of fear through him. Stray dogs. They roamed these streets too, bigger, stronger, desperate like him. And some weren't friendly. The pup had seen fights before. He had seen others get hurt, pushed aside, forgotten. He wasn't ready for that fate. Then, footsteps. They were steady, approaching his hiding place. The pup pressed himself tighter against the cold pavement, trying to disappear. A shadow loomed. The rain muffled the sound, but he could hear the person stop just beside the car. A voice, deep but calm, broke the silence. "Hey there, little guy." The pup didn't move. He barely breathed. His heart pounded in his tiny chest. A hand appeared, open, offering something small. Food. The scent hit him first. Warm, meaty, irresistible. His body screamed for it, but he hesitated. Trust was dangerous. The man didn't force it. He simply waited, his steady presence oddly soothing. The pup's ears twitched, his nose flaring as he inched forward, just enough to take a tiny, cautious bite. It was warm. It was good. His tired eyes met the stranger's for the first time. The man wasn't like the others. His gaze wasn't harsh or impatient. It was kind. For the first time in days, the pup felt something unfamiliar. Safety. The man reached out slowly. The pup tensed. Every instinct told him to run. But he didn't. The touch was gentle, not a grab, not a shove. Just warmth. Just kindness. A soft, weathered jacket wrapped around his small, trembling body. He flinched at first, but the warmth... Oh, the warmth. It seeped into his frozen fur, soothing the aches in his tiny limbs. The man lifted him carefully. The pup's ears drooped. He was too tired to fight, and maybe, just maybe, he didn't want to. The world blurred past as the man carried him through the rain. The storm didn't seem so scary anymore. The pup let his head rest against the man's chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Inside a warm, bustling room, voices surrounded them. Bright lights replaced the shadows of the alley. The scent of coffee, old paper, and something familiar. Safety. "Where'd you find him, Carter?" The deep voice belonged to another man, his uniform crisp and neat. Under a car out in the rain, the first man, Carter, answered. "Poor guy's just a pup. No collar, no chip. Just alone." The pup peeked up, ears twitching. The people gathered around, curious. Some shook their heads. "We can't keep a stray here," one officer murmured, but Carter held the pup closer. "Maybe we can." The room went quiet. The pup yawned, curling against the warmth, exhaustion pulling him under. Chief Matthews stepped forward, studying the tiny bundle in Carter's arms. "Think he's got what it takes to be a canine?" Carter looked down at the small creature nestled in his jacket. The pup's breathing was soft even. His trust had been shattered. Once, but now maybe, just maybe, it could be rebuilt. Carter smiled. "I think he's got something special." The chief nodded. "Then he needs a name." A pause, then Ace. The room agreed. It fit. As the pup, Ace, drifted into sleep, he had no idea that his life had just changed. Forever. The streets, the hunger, the loneliness, they were behind him now. And ahead, a future no stray had ever dreamed of. The once playful and carefree Ace was no longer just a stray puppy. His days of wandering the streets in fear and hunger were behind him. Now he was in the middle of a police training ground, surrounded by towering officers, stern-faced trainers and other canine recruits, strong, disciplined dogs who had been bred for this kind of work. Ace stood beside Officer Jake Carter, his ears perked up, tail stiff with nervousness. The other dogs moved in perfect formation, responding instantly to their handlers' commands. Ace, however, was different. He wasn't born into this life. "Let's see what you can do, Ace," Carter murmured, giving a reassuring pat on his side. Ace barked softly in response, but doubt hung in the air. The other officers exchanged skeptical glances. "A street dog? You really think he has what it takes?" Sergeant Miller, the head canine trainer, folded his arms. Carter met his gaze with determination. "I do, but proving it would be another story." Training wasn't easy. Ace had heart, but he lacked discipline. During obedience drills, while the other dogs sat and stayed on command, Ace would hesitate. His eyes darted around, distracted by every movement and noise. When Carter called his name, Ace would come, eventually, but not before wagging his tail and sniffing around first. "Ace, focus," Carter said, frustration creeping into his voice. Ace lowered his head, sensing Carter's disappointment. The other officers chuckled. "Not every dog is cut out for this," one of them muttered. Carter clenched his jaw. Ace wasn't just any dog. He had survived the streets, endured hunger and fear. He could do this, he just needed time. "One more time, buddy," Carter encouraged, kneeling beside Ace. "You can do this." Ace wagged his tail, reassured by Carter's presence. Despite the challenges, a deep bond was forming between them. Ace wasn't just a trainee. To Carter, he was family. Weeks passed, and the day of Ace's first major test arrived, scent tracking. The goal was simple: follow the scent and locate the target. The other recruits excelled. They followed trails with precision, earning nods of approval from the trainers. Then came Ace's turn. Carter gave the command. "Find it, Ace." Ace sniffed the ground, tail wagging. He started off strong, nose to the ground, following the scent. But then he got distracted. A bird fluttered nearby, catching his attention. Then a passing officer dropped a pen, and Ace trotted over, curious. "Ace, no, focus!" Carter's voice was sharp, urgent, but it was too late. Ace had lost the trail. Sergeant Miller sighed, shaking his head. "He's not ready." The words cut deep. Ace could sense the disappointment, his ears drooping. Miller turned to Carter. "I suggest we pull him from the program. He's just not built for this." Carter's fists clenched, but he kept his voice steady. "Give me more time. I know he can do it." Miller hesitated, then gave a short nod. "One more week. If he doesn't show progress, he's out." Carter crouched beside Ace, stroking his... "First, don't worry, buddy. We're not giving up." Ace licked Carter's hand, his silent promise to try again. With the deadline looming, Carter worked tirelessly with Ace. Every evening, long after the other recruits had gone home, Carter stayed behind, running drills with him. They practiced in empty parking lots, in fields, even in Carter's backyard. But the pressure was getting to Ace. He felt Carter's frustration, the weight of expectations pressing down. One evening, after another failed attempt, Carter sat on the ground, exhausted. "I don't get it, Ace. You've got the instincts. What's missing?" Ace whined and rested his head on Carter's knee. Then something clicked. Carter pulled a small item from his pocket, a keychain. He held it up. "Can you find this?" Ace's ears perked up. Carter tossed it a few yards away and gave the command. "Find it, Ace." Ace hesitated and then sniffed the air. His body stiffened. In an instant, he took off, weaving through the grass. A few seconds later, he stopped, pawing at something in the dirt. The keychain. Carter's eyes widened. "That's it." Ace had an exceptional sense of smell. His natural instincts were beyond the standard training methods. Carter just had to adjust the way he was teaching him. From that moment on, their training changed. Carter developed new exercises that played to Ace's strengths, focusing on tracking specific scents rather than following generic trails. And it worked. The final test arrived. Ace was up against a field of top-tier recruits. The trainers watched, closely expecting another failure. Carter knelt beside him, whispering, "Trust yourself, Ace, you can do this." Ace locked eyes with him, then turned toward the challenge. The scent sample was given. Carter gave the command. "Find it." Ace took off. This time, there was no hesitation. His nose worked fast, weaving through obstacles, ignoring distractions. Every step was filled with purpose. Minutes passed, then Ace stopped barking sharply. His paws dug into the ground. The trainers rushed over. Sergeant Miller knelt, brushing aside the dirt. His eyes widened. "Well, I'll be damned." Ace had found the hidden object, buried beneath layers of debris. Miller stood, nodding at Carter. "Looks like you were right. He does belong here." Carter grinned. "Told you." Ace, panting but proud, wagged his tail. For the first time, the other officers clapped and cheered. He wasn't just a stray anymore. He was a police dog. Months passed, and Ace's transformation was complete. No longer the frightened pup hiding under a car, he now stood tall beside Carter, his new handler. On graduation day, the recruits lined up, their handlers beside them. Ace wore his new K9 vest, the badge shining proudly. Carter patted his side. "We made it, buddy," Ace barked, his tail wagging. The chief stepped forward. "These dogs are more than just animals. They are partners, they are protectors. And today they officially join our ranks." Applause erupted as the new K9 officers received their certifications. Ace had done it. He had proven himself. But as the ceremony ended, Carter received a call. His expression turned serious. "Looks like we've got our first case, Ace," he murmured. Ace's ears perked up. He didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was certain: he was ready. Because now he wasn't just a stray. He was a hero in the making. The call came in late at night, sending a ripple of urgency through the precinct. A 5-year-old child, Emily, had vanished without a trace. Her parents were frantic, the town gripped by fear. Officer Carter stood by Ace's side, listening intently as the details unfolded. No ransom note, no security footage, just a small pink shoe found near a park bench. "The clock is ticking," Sergeant Miller said grimly. "If we don't find her soon—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Ace sat at Carter's feet, ears perked. The station was chaotic, phones ringing, officers scrambling, but Ace was still, focused, waiting. "Bring in Ace," someone muttered. It wasn't a request. It was their last hope. Carter knelt beside Ace, looking into his dark brown eyes. "This is it, buddy. This is what we've trained for." Ace pressed his nose to Carter's hand in silent understanding, but not everyone shared Carter's confidence. "Are we really trusting a former street dog with this?" One officer whispered. "He barely made it through training," another added. Carter ignored them. He knew Ace better than anyone. He had seen the raw talent, the drive, the unwavering loyalty. Ace, as if sensing the doubt, let out a quiet huff. This wasn't about proving anyone wrong. This was about finding that little girl. "Let's go," Carter said. We don't have time to waste. The search began at the park where Emily was last seen. Carter held out the tiny shoe and Ace took a deep sniff, his body stiffening as he processed the scent. "Find her, boy," Carter urged. Ace's nose hit the ground, his tail stiff with concentration. He moved forward, then hesitated. The park was packed with scents, families, joggers, stray animals. The trail was muddled, uncertain. One officer sighed. "This isn't working." But Carter wasn't ready to give up. "Give him a minute," he said firmly. Then, without warning, Ace lifted his head. His ears snapped forward and his muscles tensed. He bolted. "Ace, wait!" Carter shouted, sprinting after him. The other officers hesitated but followed. The chase led them out of the park, down twisting alleyways and dimly lit streets. Ace never faltered. Carter's lungs burned as he kept up. He had never seen Ace like this, so driven, so certain. "We're losing daylight," someone called out. But Ace didn't slow. He rounded a corner and stopped dead, his body stiff as a statue. His nose twitched, his ears flicked. Then he let out a low, menacing growl. Carter followed his gaze to an abandoned warehouse. The officers moved in carefully, weapons drawn. "Ace, what is it?" Carter whispered. Ace stepped forward, sniffing the air, then turned his head sharply toward a rusted metal door near the back. He barked once, loud, urgent. "Something's in there," Carter said. Sergeant Miller signaled for his team. "We breach on my mark." Inside, footsteps scuffled, voices whispered. The kidnappers knew they had been found. Then, silence. Ace barked again, more frantic this time. Carter's gut twisted. "She's in there." The door burst open. Officers flooded in. The kidnappers tried to run, but they hadn't counted on Ace. With a fierce growl, Ace lunged. He took down the first man, his jaws clamping onto the suspect's arm. The second kidnapper scrambled toward the back exit. "Ace, go!" Carter commanded. Ace released his grip and bolted after the second man, leaping and knocking him to the ground. The suspect struggled, but Ace was relentless, holding him in place until officers cuffed him. Then, the moment they had been waiting for. "She's here!" An officer shouted. Emily was found in a small storage room, frightened but unharmed. As Carter lifted her into his arms, her tiny voice trembled. "The dog. He saved me." Carter looked down at Ace, who panted beside him, his tail wagging. "Just slightly." "Yeah," Carter said softly. "He did." Outside, flashing lights painted the streets red and blue. The crowd that had gathered erupted into cheers as the officers led Emily back to her parents. Her mother sobbed, clutching her daughter like she would never let go. Ace sat beside Carter, watching. His ears flicked as he took in the emotion, the relief. And then, Emily's small hand reached out. Ace hesitated, then nuzzled into her. Touch. The once-lost pup, doubted by many, had done what no one else could. He had found her. He had proven himself. He was no longer just a stray. He was a hero. The police department buzzed with excitement. Officers clapped, voices cheered, and the sound of laughter filled the air. "Ace, Ace, Ace!" the chant echoed through the halls. Reporters flashed cameras, their headlines already prepared. "Brave Canine rescues child from kidnappers." The whole town wanted to meet the hero dog who had saved Emily. Ace stood tall, ears perked, his tail wagging slightly as he took in the strange energy around him. He didn't understand the flashing lights, the pats on his head from people he didn't know. But one thing was clear, Carter was smiling, and for Ace, that was all that mattered. As the celebration continued, Chief Matthews stepped forward, clearing his throat. "We don't often get heroes like this," he said, looking at Ace, "but this dog, he's more than just a hero, he's family." The room erupted into applause. Carter crouched down, scratching Ace behind the ears. "You did good, buddy," he whispered. "Better than good." Ace licked Carter's hand in response. This moment belonged to him. Later that night, Carter sat in his quiet office, Ace curled up beside him. He ran a hand through Ace's fur, his mind drifting back to the first time they had met, a small, shivering pup, barely surviving on the streets. Who would have thought that stray dog, would one day save lives. Carter smiled, but a part of him ached. Ace had given everything to this job, and though Ace didn't know it, the world now saw him as a legend. The officers who once doubted him, they now patted his head with admiration. Ace's ears twitched as if sensing Carter's thoughts. He nudged his nose against Carter's knee, tail thumping against the floor. To Ace, none of this mattered. Not the news, not the awards, not the praise. Carter was his world, and Carter knew Ace had changed his world too. With Ace's newfound fame came new responsibilities. Requests for his assistance flooded in, search and rescue missions, dangerous operations. Ace became the department's first call in life-threatening cases. Carter and Ace trained harder, worked longer hours. They became a team that no one questioned. But time had a way of creeping in. A few years passed. Ace was no longer the young pup he once was. His movements, once swift and effortless, were now slower, more calculated. Carter saw it. The way Ace hesitated before jumping into the squad car, how his breaths became heavier after long chases. Then one day, during a simple patrol, Ace hesitated before leaping over a fence. It was only for a second, a brief moment of doubt, but Carter felt his heart clench. Ace was getting older, and for the first time Carter realized his partner wouldn't be a K9 officer forever. The call came on a crisp autumn morning. Carter walked into the station, Ace trotting beside him, only to find the entire department gathered in the main hall. Chief Matthews stood at the front, a solemn but proud expression on his face. "We all know what today is," he said. Carter swallowed hard. It was time. "Ace has served this department with more courage than we could have ever asked for," Matthews continued. "And today, we honor him as he takes his final steps as an active K9 officer." Silence filled the room. Then every officer, every detective, every member of the department raised their hands in salute. Ace sat by Carter's side, his ears twitching at the unusual atmosphere. He didn't understand the weight of this moment, but Carter did. As he knelt beside Ace, he whispered, "You've done more than enough, buddy." And in that moment, Carter made a choice. Ace would not be sent away like other retired K9s. He would go home with him. Retirement suited Ace well. No more late-night calls. No more chasing criminals through alleyways. Now his days were filled with sunshine, warm grass, and lazy afternoons. Carter watched as Ace stretched out in the backyard, rolling onto his back, tail wagging as he basked in the golden light. For the first time in years, Ace didn't have to be a hero. He could just be a dog. Carter sat on the porch, a cup of coffee in his hands, watching his old partner with a soft smile. "You've earned this," he murmured. Ace perked his ears at Carter's voice and, despite his age, trotted over to his side, settling down beside him. Carter reached down, running his fingers through the thick fur that had turned slightly grey over the years. He thought about the lost pup he had found, the doubted K9 officer who had saved a life, and now the dog who had finally found a place to call home. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. The world felt still. Ace let out a content sigh, his head resting against Carter's leg. Carter looked down at him, his heart full. "You were always meant to be here," he whispered. Ace wagged his tail once, slow and steady. And for the first time, Carter truly believed it. Ace wasn't just a stray, wasn't just a K9 officer. He was family, and he always would be.